Hey, welcome to Big Me Kickoff. I'm your host, Kevin Noon. It is Monday, December 13th. 2021 is almost by us at this point. Can you believe it? Where did the season go? Where did the year go? National Signing Day is this week. The bowl game is in a couple of weeks. Hard to believe. I want to thank you for being part of the show. A lot of things to talk about. As you know, I just got back from New York on Sunday after being at the Heisman Trophy ceremony. CJ Stroud came in fourth. Certainly a lot of chatter coming out of it due to Desmond Howard and maybe comment that wasn't great, taking a shot, sort of good natured, maybe petty, probably at Ohio State, at CJ Stroud on the stage during the live telecast. Good thing that CJ Stroud is pretty even keeled. I'm not sure how everybody would have handled that. Then again, that isn't the time or the place to take him out at the knees. But yeah, a lot of people not feeling that. We talked about that a little bit earlier on Morning Scoop with Tom Orr, so you can check that out on the BuckeyeScoop channel. I won't belabor all that, but I did kind of want to talk about Heisman coverage in general, just being in New York, the opportunity to go through all of that. I've been to New York a couple of times, but it's been a while. Even when I go to Rutgers, I don't really go into the city, just no need to. I've been credentialed to the Heisman a couple of times, just haven't gone. This one wasn't necessarily a case of thinking that CJ was going to win it going in. We just, coming out of 2020, have not had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with any of the players. And granted, I wouldn't sit there and say like we went out to lunch with the players, that we had any sort of extended time, but this was the first opportunity that I've had to have a much longer call with players. Sorry, as my phone rang, I just closed that one off. First opportunity to be able to sit there and talk to players at length and have the chance in a 15-minute interview session to really ask Stroud maybe more questions than I had in 2 years. Because let's not forget, year one, we never really got to talk to him. We don't get to talk to backups who aren't playing, and he didn't play that much. So this was the year to talk to him. We got to move away from virtual to some on-campus things, which was great and all. But even with that, it's a lot of you ask your question and then you're done. So you don't get to build off of questions, which so much of this is part of. People sit there and they get mad at the media. Well, why aren't you going in and asking the difficult questions? Well, one, we got to work around these guys, and we can't go in there threatening to burn the whole building down with our questions. And two, when we move away from more small group setting type of interviews, there's just not the opportunity to build, because you're not going to come out with your quote unquote toughest question out of the gate. You can't. So you have to kind of build up to it. So it was a good opportunity to really get to know CJ, get to, talk to him about some things. He'll be back. He'll be back there next year. I'm pretty sure on that. We'll talk about that here in a second, but I just kind of want to talk about the weekend in general and my impressions of being at the event. And it's not what it used to be with the downtown athletic club. We were in one location. The media headquarters was the Marriott Marquis in Times Square. Fantastic location. Very expensive, but fantastic location. But, the facility that they did the award was over at the Lincoln Center, and not exactly next door. Ended up having to take an Uber over there. So, they were kept sequestered from us a decent amount. I mean, part of that's just out of, any year they're going to do that. But I think it was even maybe a little more important that they didn't want a bunch of media members that, could breathe on the players or anything else. And, this isn't getting into what your beliefs on this or that are. Players are going to have games to play in a couple of weeks. Somebody has a cold. They don't want to give it to the players. So they kept them pretty much at an arm's distance from us, which, I understand. One thing that I was not prepared for, kind of getting off on a little bit of a tangent, is just how expensive Ubers are in New York City. I don't Uber from where I live out here in East Columbus downtown that much because, oh my God, I'm not going to pay $30 to Uber there and $30 to Uber back, from a night of libations and frivolity. So generally, I just tend to keep it pretty local or just don't go out that much. It's just too dangerous out there with a lot of things going on. You just don't want to risk it if you get behind a wheel. But in New York, it was $65, give or take, each way from LaGuardia to the hotel. Everybody's like, well, why didn't you take the subway? What, you big chicken? Why didn't you take the subway? There's not that option out at LaGuardia. In hindsight, next time I'll probably just fly into Newark and take the train in from there. And sure, your time's got to be worth something, and taking the path in and whatever is one thing, but if I could save $130 in Uber fees, I'm going to do that. Second thing is, it is such a great food city. I wish I would have had more opportunity to be able to go and explore restaurants and do some things. I didn't get to eat the morning of the flight coming out there. I flew out there on Friday. Early flight out of John Glenn, Port Columbus Airport. Oh, I'll eat when I get to New York. I'll have a little time before the first event. Well, part of the reason that Uber was $65 is even though I'm going about 9 miles as the crow flies, it took 45 minutes, 50 minutes with traffic. And mind you, I didn't get in at rush hour. I think I landed at like 11 a.m. So by the time I got to the hotel, I had about 15 minutes before I needed to be at my first event. So I didn't get to eat then. Go through the first event, have to write, have to turn videos, all that good stuff. Anybody who's a member of BuckeyeScoop saw all of that. If you're not a member of BuckeyeScoop, check it out. So we get all that done. It's about 6:30. I'm like, there's a hotel lounge, like for elite club members, which I happen to belong to. Lounge is closed. Didn't know that going in. That was a problem too. So I ended up going down to the hotel bar and order like a $17 order of chicken tenders, I guess I'll call them. Tony Gerdeman would probably call them wings. But I think there were 5 of them. I was so hungry. They may have been the most delicious thing in the world, or they could have been god awful. I wouldn't know, but I was starving. I think we end up getting to dinner by about 9:30. I'm there with a couple other writers from the Ohio State beat, and we're just going to walk around till we see something, which is dangerous. Because, oh, do you want that? I don't know. Let's go another block. Do you want that? We'll go another block. I don't know how many blocks we walked, but we found this nice little Italian place. I was able to get cacio e pepe, which I love. Very simple pasta dish, like pecorino romano, black pepper, and butter. But it's not easy to make it well. And this place did that well, but for being an Italian place, it was margarita night or something. So that was the drink special. And if you find a drink special in New York, you better jump on it, because let me tell you, that hotel bar had $19 spiked eggnog. So being able to get a marg for $7 wasn't that bad. So end up getting back to the hotel a little before midnight, get into the next day. We get another opportunity to talk to the players. It's hard to get through that event and not be a fan of CJ Stroud and how he handled it. He ends up having to deal kind of with that Desmond rigmarole. He ends up being there, finishes 4th, and it's kind of a distant 4th. I mean, a lot of people were upset about that, like there was some sort of fix being in. No, folks, it's just how the votes are. But, he was a lot closer to 5th than he was to 3rd. So, you want to bring 4 in. You want to give everybody the opportunity. I'm sure CJ at the end of the day is like, I would have rather been able to go and do all this than to stay home, being, a couple hundred points behind Kenny Pickett, the Pittsburgh quarterback. But, he really handled it well. And I expect him to be back there in 22. Now, obviously, Bryce Young will be back, and he'll be trying to break or tie Eddie or Archie's record of back-to-back Heismans. But we get it to this all the time. An underclassman wins the Heisman. It's like, well, it's been a good run, Arch. You'll always have 74 and 75, and then it doesn't happen. So who else could be there? Obviously, I think CJ Stroud's got a great opportunity. Yes, he's going to lose some receivers around him. Yes, he's going to lose probably some guys on the offensive line. It's going to be a little bit of a different look, but I think that this Ohio State team is going to be much more experienced, Stroud included, at various positions, and I think that's going to be huge. Now, Stroud may not be called upon as much if the defense gets itself fixed. If the defense gets itself fixed, Ohio State may not have to go out and score 50 in a game. But if they're talented enough and they only play them in a half, it may take everything they have to keep them under 50 because of what's going to go on. But what about Trevion Henderson? Could he be a Heisman guy? I mean, he rushed for 1165, 15 rushing touchdowns, 4 receiving touchdowns. You got to figure there's going to be a good opportunity for him. What about Jackson Smith-Njigba? 80 catches, 1259 yardage, 6 touchdowns. And that's because there were 25 touchdowns between Olave and Wilson. So you got to figure that number is going to go up with Olave gone and Wilson probably gone. I think there's a much better, people are saying, well, maybe he'll play in the Rose Bowl. Well, maybe he will play in the Rose Bowl. I don't think he's going to pull an Olave decision to come back for another year. But with JSN becoming kind of the number one, 80, 1259, and 6 should probably, he could probably stay at 80 or go up a little bit more. That yardage could go up, and those touchdowns certainly will. How about some other names? How about Caleb Williams, quarterback at Oklahoma? He only started 7 games. He played in 3 other games, kind of in junker time. 1,670 yards, 18 touchdowns, 4 picks. It's going to be interesting to see what things look like there now with Lincoln Riley moving on to USC, Brent Venables coming in, how that's all going to shape up. How about Will Anderson? Everybody wants to talk about a defensive player. Aiden Hutchinson finished second for that team up north. Will Anderson had better numbers just for the sake of numbers. Maybe you buy more about what was more impactful, that's fine. But 15.5 sacks, 31.5 TFLs. But what happens there with Will Anderson? Does he split some vote with Bryce Young? Does Henderson and JSN split vote with CJ Stroud? I mean, this is so early in the game. We're just kind of talking about it here. Be sure to let me know in the comments and however you're viewing or listening to this podcast who you think should be there in 2022. Another name that's getting a lot of pick is kind of the small school, and I don't consider Syracuse to be a small school, but I consider it to be a small football program. What about Sean Tucker, the running back? 1,751 yards, 14 touchdowns. He's not going to sneak up on anybody this year, but I think the ACC is wide open for somebody to come in and put up those big numbers. Is Clemson suddenly going to be back? We saw that Wake Forest couldn't play any defense, and Wake Forest is going to lose a lot. I mean, we saw Pittsburgh come in and win, but so there you go. I mean, there's 5 names to go along with CJ Stroud, to go along with Bryce Young. But let's remember, too, who we were talking about this time last year. Spencer Rattler, Sam Howell out of UNC. A lot of names that we were talking about that just JT Daniels out of UGA. I mean, he lost a job to Stetson Bennett. You just don't know. You don't know. Sticking with football here, talk a little bit about, and very little, the Ryan Day and the Chicago Bears. And, as I was landing, I had some text messages from friends going, is this happening? There was an NFL report saying that not only was Ryan Day being pursued, but Trace Armstrong, who's his agent, represents him, was being considered for a front office position. Well, Trace Armstrong came in and said, no, that's not the case. Ryan Day hasn't really said much. I had the chance to watch the Bears play last night, and I really am pulling for Justin Fields. Not a Bears fan. I don't dislike the Bears. I mean, if you say you got to pick somebody in the NFC North, it's not going to be Detroit. It's not going to be Minnesota. It's not going to be Green Bay. I mean, I guess it would be Chicago. But that offensive line, oof. Just some of the weapons he has around him, just not quite there. And that defense, Olay. I mean, just a lot of times where it looked like they were running away from the play. It was just a mess. But no, I don't see Ryan Day going to the Bears. I certainly don't see Trace Armstrong going to the Bears. But what I do see is the necessity for Ohio State to figure out what it is going to do in terms of a contract extension. And it's such a polarizing topic on message boards and on social. Well, everybody remembers the last game, which was a loss. Oh my God, people's heads are falling off right now over that. He's 33-4, people. He's lost one Big Ten game. People 6 hours before the game were like, we got to sign him to $15 million a year. They come out, team doesn't play a great game. The game plan itself was not good. But, it is what it is. Sometimes you're going to have a stinker. And it was a stinker. And people now are like, well, maybe we should wait and see. Maybe we should wait and see. Well, you want to sit there and have these types of day to the Bears conversations going on? Do you want to keep all that open? No. Sign the deal. Get something done. It ain't your money. It's the university money. It's monopoly money, honestly. Do you think that some of these schools really think that they're going to end up paying out these entire contracts as written? These things get ripped up every couple of years anyway because it got to keep up with the Jimmies and the Joes. Making $6 million a year, $6.5 million a year isn't making $10 million a year. Isn't making $9.5 million a year. So expect something to get done here in the near future on that. I haven't necessarily heard any, I haven't heard any great numbers or anything at this point, but expect something to get done. Shifting gears quickly to basketball as we come to an end here on the Big Me Kickoff. Ohio State's up to number 15 in the AP in basketball, coming off of a big win or a big week where, the Buckeyes were able to get a couple of wins. Wisconsin over the weekend. I'm drawing a blank on the other one. I can see it in my mind and I don't remember. But, Ohio State now is in a little bit of a holding pattern, has Kentucky on Saturday, and that will be a big one, another top 15 type of matchup. E.J. Liddell was named co-Big Ten Player of the Week. He's been double figures in all 10 games for the Buckeyes, 21.5 points, 8 boards, 3.5 assists, 1.5 blocks this week in terms of what he got and was noted for being Big Ten co-Player of the Week. What are your thoughts on the Buckeyes? I mean, there were a lot of people ready to jump ship. Ohio State lost on a buzzer beater to Florida. Ohio State lost to Xavier, but then Ohio State turns around and has some big wins. I mean, obviously that Duke win is as big as they get. They're sitting 2-0 in the Big Ten. They step out of Big Ten play briefly to finish the end of the non-conference, and then 18 games in conference after that. Only 3 teams are ranked in the Big Ten right now with Purdue and Michigan State. Michigan's been a disappointment. Maryland's been disappointment. Mark Turgeon's already out there with the Terps. So does that make the Big Ten more winnable? Does that mean that, that it's an easier path? Is Ohio State still going to be a team that's, maybe going to go 15-5 in conference? Better? Worse? Remember, Ohio State's doing this without Justice Suing and without Seth Towns. Ohio State just got Eugene Brown back recently, who had been dealing with, I think it was concussion protocol. But Justice Suing is still a really large part of the offense. He's a starter. Seth Towns, when he plays, can be very meaningful. Both are kind of still on the same timetable. I think that Towns was mid to late December. I've always said early January. Here we are mid-December. So, we're kind of at the open part of that window. We'll see. Justice Suing was always described as a couple of weeks, and it's been a couple of weeks for a couple of weeks, and I think it's going to be a couple of weeks more. But once they get him back, as long as it doesn't end up being something that ends up costing him the season, it's going to make Ohio State that much more dangerous, that much deeper. This isn't the time of the year necessarily where you're shortening the bench. And, if you could get somebody back like Suing, that's going to make everybody that much better. And, just a quick note too, I was kind of reading on social about Holtman doing radio and talking about how important it was them recruiting Kyle Young to come back for this additional year. And yeah, Kyle Young really has been a glue guy. I mean, he just, from distance, he's been fantastic. I think he really adds an extra body there with EJ and with Zed Key, just another guy who can get down to the paint and bang. They really haven't been able to get much out of Joey Brunk, but let's remember Joey Brunk was coming off of an injury as well, and everybody kind of comes back at their own time. And I think that Joey is going to be more valuable, once they get into the grind of the Big Ten. He's been there, done that, has the T-shirt, so that'll all be important. So his moment will come. We've certainly seen Jamari Wheeler's moment come. He's had some big games, especially in the Penn State game. We certainly have seen Cedric Russell's time come. He's had some big games, hit some key buckets. So it's good to see the transfers doing well. It's good to see guys like Malachi Branham doing really well. I mean, he's meant a lot to this team. The team, if they're going to remain successful, though, has to hold on to the ball better. They have to hold on to the ball better. Stop turning it over. See what happens. Things are well. They got off to a bad start against Wisconsin. Why? They were turning the ball over. They stopped turning it over. Whoa, lo and behold, they're playing a lot better. We can go back to the Duke game. Early in the game, turning the ball over. They get down by as many as 15. Stop turning it over. They come back and win. They finish on a 14-1 run to win the game. So, it's so simple. It's so simple that we can all talk about this, but I promise you, if it were that simple, we'd all be doing it. So there you go. I'm looking forward to that game here coming up this weekend. That'll be part of the CBS Sports Classic. I believe that game is in Vegas. Did not manage to get on that trip, but that's probably for the best. I don't need to be around Vegas and the temptations of spending money there and losing money there. So there you go. But we're a little over 20 minutes, so we're going to call this a show here on the Big Me Kickoff. Once again, I want to thank you for watching. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to hit the bell, subscribe to the channel. That helps us out tremendously. If you're watching us or listening to us on iTunes or any of the other YouTube or podcasting outlets, I need to get this speech done a little better. Be sure to give us a 5-star rating. That helps us be distributed to more people. That all helps the channel. Means a lot to us. I consider it a real favor. But once again, I'm your host, Kevin Noon. I want to thank you for being part of the show, and we will talk to you again later this week.